All right, good afternoon and welcome everyone. My name is Jeffrey Wyant and I'm a member of the HEAL Data Stewardship Group. I want to thank you all for joining us today for the 13th installment of our Fresh Fair webinar series, also the first one of 2023. Today's webinar is called Step-by-Step Checklist for HEAL Compliant Data, and will feature a presentation walking investigators through the newly developed HEAL Compliant Data Checklist. This presentation will be followed by a live Q&A focused on data sharing and how making your data HEAL compliant sets you up for success with the 2023 NIH Data Management and Sharing Policy and accelerates your research and publications. If you have any questions at any point, please feel free to type that into the Q&A box and we'll answer those in the latter half of our presentation. We're joined today by presenters Kira Bradford and Ali Gartland-Gray. Kira Bradford, PhD, is a scientific computing principal investigator at RTI International, working on the intersection between cloud-based cyber infrastructure development and scientific research. Bradford is a co-lead of the Data Management and Consultancy Group for the NIH HEAL Data Stewardship Group. Her team science background combined with her professional and research experiences provide a foundation for her work as a leader in multidisciplinary and multi-institutional projects that accelerate research by enabling access to computational cloud-based resources. Ali Gartland-Gray, MPS, is a research data analyst in the Research Computing Division, also at RTI International. She has experience in data collection, management, and storage, and has nearly 4 years of experience working in the field of health informatics in a combination of both academic and professional settings. Her educational background is in biology and biomedical health and informatics, and she leverages this knowledge as a HEAL steward to help develop tools and guidance for research data governance, curation, and deposition. With that, I'll pass it over to Kira to begin the presentation.
Thanks so much, Jeffrey. Hey, folks. We'll first start off by going over today's learning objectives. So this is the first webinar of the HEAL Data Stewardship Group since coming into the new year. So this webinar is geared not only towards our current HEAL awardees, but also new HEAL awardees who are not yet as familiar with the HEAL ecosystem. So we'll do an overview of the HEAL data ecosystem, followed by an introduction or reintroduction to the HEAL Data Stewardship Group and what we're all about. And then my colleague Ali will go over an introduction to the HEAL checklist that we are unveiling today, as well as providing some guidance on getting started on the HEAL data platform. Next slide, please. All right, so for those of you who are not as familiar with the HEAL data ecosystem, welcome to the HEAL Initiative, first of all. So the HEAL data ecosystem is comprised of many different data generating studies. And one of the first things that the HEAL Data Stewardship Group did is we did an initial landscape analysis and discovered that across these studies, there are over 20 different data types being generated. So some of the examples you see in the figure here. So there are imaging data being generated, clinical data, omics data, anything and everything you can think of, and not just in humans, but across 8 different species, everything from humans down to mice, mollusks, and even sheep. So with such a vast array of data, and with so much funding behind the HEAL initiative, there is a need for making sure that this data is not only accessible for future researchers, but also sustainable. Next slide, please. And so this is how the HEAL data distributed ecosystem came into existence. So when we were first initially discussing what this ecosystem would look like, we realized it didn't make sense to put 20 different types of data across 8 different species into a single repository. Instead, we wanted to take advantage and leverage existing repositories that best fit each of the individual data types. And so what we have done is we have vetted over 20 different types of HEAL compliant repositories, and each of these repositories can serve different data types or can even take in a variety of data types. So as a HEAL investigator, it'll be down to you to decide which repository, if it's not already specified in your award, to put your data into. And so once the data makes its way into the HEAL repository, you may also have heard about something called the HEAL Data Platform. So the HEAL platform is going to be the central metadata catalog, as well as the central portal through which investigators and other external stakeholders can search and find information about HEAL studies. And so with the metadata catalog functionality, users can use the platform to figure out what data exists in the HEAL ecosystem, as well as which repository that data is available in. And if they are a researcher, they can apply for access and reuse that data, leading to long-term sustainability. Next slide, please. So that's a lot of information, and that's a pretty heavy lift, we realize, for HEAL investigators to take on. But we are here to say you are not alone. So we are the HEAL Data Stewardship Group, and part of our mission is to help HEAL investigators make their data more fair, more findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. And to do that, we have developed a whole bunch of processes, guidance, and solutions for data harmonization, metadata collection, and sharing your data. Next slide, please. So just a tiny bit of background about us. We are a group comprised of 2 institutions, the RENC at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, as well as RTI International. And we realized that the HEAL initiative is such a large portfolio that we needed to split our group decisively. So we have Becky Boyles, as well as myself, helping to lead the data management and consultancy aspect of the data stewardship group. So if you've ever reached out to us via Connect With Us forum, you'll have either met with us or one of our colleagues to gain some insight and some guidance for making your HEAL related decisions. We also have Aja from RENC, who is leading the coordination and communication and outreach. So her group is responsible for putting on these webinars. And finally, we have Gaurav of the semantic search team. So he is helping to provide guidance to the stewards for ways that we can make your data more searchable and findable and discoverable. Next slide, please. So with that, I will now hand it over to Ali to unveil the HEAL Investigator Roadmap, one of the many resources we, the stewards, have developed to help HEAL investigators on their journey to maximize their data.
Thanks, Kira. Okay, so like Kira mentioned, I'm going to run through the investigator checklist that we have up on our website, healdatafair.org. And essentially, it's a step-by-step guide to data management and sharing recommendations for HEAL studies. So it's especially useful for preparing to comply with NIH's data management and sharing policy. And the checklist is interactive, and it includes 9 steps, starting from when your award was received all the way to the end of the project when you're reporting your research publications. And on the website version, you can click through each step and read additional information and find helpful links. Next slide, please. Okay, so I think we'll just get started by walking through each step. So step 1 is pretty self-explanatory. Your award was received, and that's great. And then step 2 is to provide your data management and sharing plan to the HEAL stewards via email if possible. So as an NIH HEAL Initiative awardee, you likely submitted a data management and sharing plan as part of your application. And sharing that plan with the HEAL stewards is optional, but it will help us provide some insight into the needs of the HEAL investigators. And then that in turn will help us create better resources and guidance to help address those needs. And for if there's any reason that you haven't submitted a DMP yet, this section of the checklist also helps provide helpful guidance and links for developing one. And of course, you can always reach out to us for help too. And then finally, step 3 is to register your study on clinicaltrials.gov. But this, of course, only applies to studies that are conducting clinical trials. So if you're not, then you can skip that step. Next slide, please. Okay, so steps 4 and 5 of the checklist are to register your study on the platform and to provide study level metadata. And luckily, this is a pretty easy and straightforward process. So first, what you'll do is navigate to the HEAL Data Platform website, and there you'll find really detailed documentation about the registration process. But essentially, what you'll do is you'll search for your study on the platform, and then you'll request access to register your study. And that might take a couple of days for access to be granted. And then next, you'll just complete the form for study registration, and that should only take about 10 to 15 minutes. And then finally, you'll submit your study level metadata. So as part of platform registration, you will create an account with the Center for Expanded Data Annotation and Retrieval, or CEDAR. And once you've finished platform registration, a study level metadata form will automatically be created in your CEDAR account. And so to complete that form, you'll simply log in and fill it out. And please note that even if you are not ready to share your data or you cannot share your data, you can still complete the CEDAR form, because the form won't ask you to fill out any type of sensitive information. And lastly, the platform team has also created extensive documentation about each metadata field in the CEDAR form, and you can find a link to that in the checklist, and we'll be dropping a link in the chat for that as well. Next slide, please. Step 6 of the checklist is to select a HEAL compliant repository. And we provide a list of compliant repositories on the healdatafair.org website, and they are loosely ordered by preference. We compiled this list by evaluating each repository on a variety of criteria, such as fair alignment and suitability for data type, persistence, and so on. And as you can see, each of the repositories have descriptive tags and additional information to help you select the most appropriate home for your HEAL data. And we also provide links out to re3data.org where applicable. And there you can find additional information on each repository too. And if after reviewing this page, you're still stumped on which repository you want to select, you can always reach out to us. We, as the stewards, provide individualized consulting services on repository selection, among other topics too, and we're always here to help. Next slide, please. And now we're at step 7. So step 7 is a reminder to use common data elements, or CDEs, to collect your data whenever possible. CDEs are standardized questionnaires for collecting data about subjects in your study. And HEAL has 16 core questionnaires and 180 discrete data elements for the 9 core pain domains, plus a demographics questionnaire, which all HEAL pain studies are required to collect. HEAL also has about 500 supplemental questionnaires that are available for optional use, and Laura Wadner and Andrew Siddons and team manage the HEAL CDE program and maintain the box account for the HEAL CDEs. But the HEAL team is also working on developing a publicly searchable repository for those HEAL CDEs. Next slide, please. All right, so that brings us to steps 8 and 9. So step number 8 is to submit your data to your repository of choice. And if you picked a repository back in step 6 and that's changed by the time that you're ready to submit your data, that is totally fine. All you'd need to do is update your repository choice in the HEAL platform. And then we also recommend that you update your data management and sharing plan too, to reflect that and any other changes. And then in addition to submitting your HEAL data to a repository, you'll also want to submit both study level and variable level metadata. And the HEAL stewards and platform teams are working to develop instructions and tools for this process. And then finally, we've reached step 9, which is the last step, and that is to report your research publications no later than 4 weeks after the date of publication in a journal. You should also be sure to acknowledge NIH HEAL Initiative support by referencing the HEAL in the acknowledgement section using the sentence on the slide, and you can also find the sentence on the website and the checklist as well. And with that, we've finished the checklist, and so I'll hand it back to Jeffrey.
Awesome. Thank you, Kira. Thank you, Allie. So we'll now move into our Q&A session. And I'm going to invite our NIH representatives, Jess Mazarek and Anthony Juni, to join us. And I'll ask them, along with Ali and Kira, to turn on your cameras. We'll now stop the screen sharing and begin the Q&A session. Again, those questions you can type in at the bottom in that Q&A box. And I see there's already a number coming in, so that's awesome. First question: why was the decision made to use multiple repositories instead of just one central repository? Kira, I think I'm going to direct that question to you.
Sure, Jeffrey. There's a couple of reasons why we made this decision overall, but one of the reasons why we wanted to leverage existing repositories is that many of them have special curation services available for their specific data types. And so one of the things that we are looking to do in the HEAL initiative is not only store HEAL data sustainably, but we want the highest quality data we can get. And so with those curation services, that's a possibility. The other thing that I forgot to mention in my talk is that we have also vetted a couple of generalist repositories because we recognize that there are several studies that are generating more than one different type of data. And so for them, if it makes more sense, they can simply use one of those generalist repositories to submit all of their data types to. But there is the caveat that not the generalists don't typically provide the same data curation services.
Great, thank you. Next question: what is the purpose of the HEAL platform, and how are HEAL investigators expected to interact with them? Jess or Anthony, I'm going to kick that question to y'all.
I can start, and then Anthony, if you want to chime in too. Yeah, thanks for the question. So the platform is the central web interface that allows for search and access to HEAL data. It also has workspaces for analytical tools for compute. And it's what we call a data mesh. So this means that it connects to data that are stored in various different repositories, as Kira alluded to earlier. And so as a HEAL investigator, you'll need to register your study in the platform and provide study level metadata to make your study discoverable through the platform. And this can be done very early in the study, and it doesn't require you being ready to share your data.
Yeah, and just at a high level of what the benefit is for providing this study level metadata, a robust study level metadata model within the HEAL platform supports diverse search capabilities, allowing investigators, clinicians, people with lived experience, and many stakeholders to find studies and data aligned with their interests, as well as drive collaboration and translation of research across research areas. As mentioned previously, the teams have developed resources and guidance for how to complete your study level metadata, as we want to ensure we're making this process as clear and easy as possible.
Excellent. Thanks both. Next question here. What should investigators' #1 priority be if they are just getting started in the HEAL initiative? Ali, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, thank you. So the #1 priority should be to register your study on the platform. And even though you didn't ask for it, the #2 priority should be to complete the study level metadata form on CEDAR. And the reason for that is that these are both steps that apply to all HEAL awards. And doing so will help make your study more findable and accessible, and it'll also help facilitate data sharing and collaboration within the HEAL ecosystem. And also, all of your studies should have already been logged into the platform using publicly available information on NIH Reporter. And so registering for the platform and providing your study level metadata will just help you be able to verify how your study is portrayed on the platform, and it'll help you just to be able to add additional information about your study.
Excellent. All right, next question here. What should HEAL investigators be thinking about as their award nears the end of their period of performance? Ali, do you want to take that one again?
Yeah, I can take that one. So I would say double checking your data management and sharing plan and updating it to make sure that you're reflecting any changes that you made throughout the life of your award. Also depositing data into a HEAL compliant repository, of course. And then I would also say just remembering to report your publications.
I can jump in here too. HEAL has always been very intent on broadly disseminating findings and data and sort of understanding the evolving crisis and what communities need to address the issues that they're seeing in their own communities. And so we're also working to put resources in place to help more broadly share HEAL findings. And this past fall, we funded HEAL Connections. So these awardees are partnering with diverse communities to build sustained pathways for this bidirectional knowledge sharing. And they'll also be providing centralized support and resources for HEAL-funded investigators to integrate stakeholder input into how we structure research projects and sharing of those findings. And so you'll all hear more about these efforts very soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Allie. Thanks, Jess. Next question here. I didn't budget or budget enough to support being compliant with the HEAL data sharing policy. What should I do?
I can take that one.
Okay.
So I'll say starting early will save costs and it'll save efforts early on. So if you're already worried about the budget, please get rolling. Reach out to our teams. The platform and Stewards teams have developed many resources and guidance that can really, it still will be work for investigators, but it really lowers the barrier and, gives you a great starting point. They're here to consult. They're here to point you in the right direction. So do reach out. We always aim to reduce the burden for investigators in the processes that we're developing. Yeah, if you need advice or consultation on data sharing, contact the stewards and the platform teams. In the past, we've put out notices of special interest to help make HEAL data fair. And so you can keep eyes out for those kinds of opportunities. And resources at universities can also be helpful, like your fellow librarians. They're experts in this space and they're experts in data management and getting data ready to share. So consultation with them or help with those resources will be great as well. And then hopefully this won't be an issue for newer awards and as we move forward, because in line with NIH, we've been sharing guidance on how to budget for data sharing and allowable costs. And that is something that we've been hopefully, iterating in the HEAL funding announcements that are out there. So yeah.
Excellent. And looking at this next question, this also might be you, Jess, and maybe Anthony here as well. I'm preparing an application for a HEAL FOA currently. How do I align the HEAL sharing requirements with the upcoming requirements under the data management and sharing plan?
Yeah, I can go ahead and get us started here, and Jess, I'll of course feel free to jump in and add to. So the new NIH data management and data sharing policy requires a data management plan and sharing plan be submitted for most types of applications, and it has 6 key required elements. HEAL has a new resource that walks applicants through each of those 6 elements, pointing to resources for each one and flagging where HEAL has specific requirements, such as selecting from our list of those repositories that were discussed before and integrating our study level metadata to connect to the platform, as well as pointing to all that guidance documentation that we discussed earlier. So we hope this will be a great resource for new HEAL applicants and also for HEAL program staff to think about building more robust data management and sharing plans.
I can jump in too. I think, HEAL has been really in line with the NIH, the HEAL policy, the HEAL open access and data sharing policy has been pretty in line with the NIH policy. So we've kind of had that in mind as we've been developing resources. And the resource Anthony pointed out was the newest one that we've kind of put out there. But I would say that I think a lot of the materials that the stewards in particular have developed would be really helpful for data sharing across the board and helping to understand how to adhere to that new policy. And then back to the budget question, I mentioned the NIH has guidance for allowable costs. So as you're developing your applications, definitely be looking at that.
Awesome. All right, next question is also maybe a little bit related to budget here. What should you do if you got HEAL funding a long time ago and you started/completed study before rules were finalized? Jess or Anthony, do you want to take that, or?
Yeah, so I think it depends on what the specific rule you're referring to would be. I mean, I think we have flexibility around some of them, and the easiest thing to do, it doesn't take very long to register your study and fill out the metadata. So that is a really great starting point. I think those, we estimate that takes about an hour and a half total time. So starting there would be really good. And then reaching out to the stewards for advice or guidance on, how you can adhere to the requirements, or myself would be a good place to start. But I think it kind of depends on which piece you're referring to.
Okay. Next question. Why does one need an additional account with CEDAR?
I'm happy to jump in here. So when we were thinking through processes for both developing the study level metadata model within the HEAL platform, as well as resources to support investigators and staff in curating that metadata, we were wanting to make certain we were both not reinventing the wheel, but also leveraging existing resources and tools where they exist. So CEDAR, which is that Center for Expanded Data and Annotation and Retrieval, is developed at Stanford Center for Biomedical Informatics, and was just a great tool to support investigators and people in providing that metadata. So it's that kind of a third-party tool that allows for that resource and allows for that curation to be a bit more easy. It leverages a lot of control vocabularies and ontologies in backend, and is also integrated with a number of different authorization and authentication tools. So building that account should hopefully be easy. But that was really the aim, is to lower the burden and leverage existing tools where they exist.
Perfect. Next question. Once we select a repository, once we select a repository, do we need to inform the stewards or document this somewhere? Ali or Kira, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I can take that one. So if you have not registered your study on the platform yet, part of the registration process will ask if you have selected a repository. It's not a required field, and so you can skip it. So, selecting a repository isn't a prerequisite to registering on the platform. If you have already registered and you select a repository afterwards, you can reach out to either us or the platform team, and we can make sure that that is added to your study record on the platform website.
Yeah, and I don't think we talked about specifically in this webinar yet. Sorry to interrupt, Jeffrey, but it might be worth mentioning that the registration process actually populates the CEDAR form. So it lowers the barrier by registering and having that information when you come to register of what you'll have to actually complete in the CEDAR form. So, a lot of repositories have some metadata, and you might have already done some work at that repository. And so the idea is that the metadata that is elsewhere, like in Reporter and in clinicaltrials.gov and in the repository, which are the fields that are asked for during registration, will populate that CEDAR form so that it lowers the work that the investigator or whoever's filling it out, the researcher filling it out, will have to do.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all. Next question, and Ali, I might direct this one to you again. I think you covered this briefly on your presentation, but are the demographic CDEs for pain studies only, or for all studies regardless of topic focus?
I might actually hand that one off to Anthony, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So the aim of the CDE initiative and implementation is mandatory for those pain clinical studies, though we highly encourage any investigators and studies that are interested in leveraging the CDEs to implement them. There are a number of different resources to make that implementation process very easy, including standardized electronic case report forms and data dictionaries and a number of different tools that can support that implementation. And as mentioned, we're working on building a more public-facing repository of those CDEs so that you can search and explore them in a bit more detail. I highly encourage you to reach out to Dr. Laura Wadner and Andrew Siddons if you're interested in learning more. And we in the Stewards are happy to support facilitating, exploring how to best leverage the CDEs in your study.
Awesome. Next up, are there limits on the size of data sets that we can upload to the repository? For example, high resolution ultrasound images may require gigabytes of storage.
I can take that one. Yeah, so really that will just depend on which repository from the HEAL compliant repository list that is selected. Some of these repositories are specifically to accommodate imaging data, and so of course they recognize the large file sizes of this imaging data, and so knowing that you're going to submit images actually should help you narrow down which repository you can submit to on that list. But also, if you have any additional questions or still need help selecting a repository, feel free to reach out to us and we can help with that.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay, next question. Does study inclusion in the HEAL platform require specific language in consent forms beyond noting the data repository? Let me read that one more time. Does study inclusion in the HEAL platform require specific language in consent forms beyond noting the data repository?
I'm happy to jump in here, or Jess. So yeah, registering your study in the platform and going through that study registration process, as well as providing your study level metadata, will not have any potential disclosure or risks for some of those consents and patient securities. So highly encourage you and provide documentation and go through that process. As far as data consent, data use agreements, and data access privileges, and all those like highly sensitive and very important issues to consider surrounding patient consent and data security, we're leveraging a lot of the processes that are in place at those external repositories to ensure all the necessary data securities and consent processes that are aligned and noted in your data consent and IRB and et cetera are in place and can be curated and enforced at the repository level whenever people are looking to access and leverage controlled access data. I hope that answers kind of the question there, but feel free to follow up if there's any additional nuances we can provide.
Excellent. Next up, does HEAL have a cost estimating tool similar to what NDA is offering, but more customized? And there's a follow-up to that says, if it has both labor and non-labor cost, it will be more helpful.
I could start with this, and then maybe Kira or Ali wants to jump in too. We don't have an estimate tool right now. I think the challenge that we've faced when we think about how to do this is the complexity of the types of studies and types of data that HEAL is supporting. And so there are more and less data intensive programs out there. And so I think, we would really run the risk of not having a tool that would be very good for anyone if we try to make one tool. So this is a really good point though. And I don't know, Kira, Ali, what do you think? Is it possible to do a budget estimate tool for HEAL?
So, I mean, there's a variety of things that we are hoping investigators budget for. So it's not only picking a repository, some repositories may have a cost associated with them, but it's also time and labor to do data curation if it needs to be done up front, as well as standardizing any kind of metadata that's being collected, and then also doing the steps to be compliant with the HEAL data sharing policy. So I think some of those steps can be generalized, but this, I agree, Jess, this is an excellent point. So the HEAL stewards will take it under advisement and see what we can do with it.
Excellent. Next question, a little lengthy here. It's a little bit focused, again, to a similar question on size and just the amount of data in the upload. But the question is, I've done a few data shares with the NDA and their data dictionary and templates. I'm still a bit confused about how these repositories can handle large batches of data, such as in a timeline follow back, TLFB. We have some studies with TLFB that goes back as far as 365 days or more. Is HEAL actually interested in all 365 days of TLFB data, or would a summary of the findings make more sense to build a template around? Additionally, we also use Fitbit and Garmin data, and just still a bit confused about how much of that data HEAL wants us to share.
I'm happy to jump in here, but also Ali and Kira and all, please feel free to jump in. I think at a high level, there's extreme heterogeneity and diversity of data across HEAL. So we really want to ensure and leverage all the subject matter expertise within your own teams to see what level of sharing you think is most important for your own scientific field, and which digital assets would be of highest value for reuse. We do encourage to share as raw data or as much data as possible. And most of the repositories that we've reviewed are able to accept some of those, that big data, especially in the imaging field and et cetera. So there's lots of diversity of curation protocols and best practices at each of those repositories that we're aiming to leverage to ensure that not only can you share as much data as you're willing to share, but it can be curated at the highest quality and in line with data type specific and domain specific best practices, be it imaging data or the TLFB data or that big data. So highly encourage you to reach out here for these very kind of highly data type specific questions so that we can ensure we're finding the repository of best fit for you. And I know that's kind of a high level question and a high level answer, but Ali and Kira, feel free to jump in for any other guidance, but thank you.
So I'll jump in and say two things. One, depending on the repository you choose, some repositories do have a limit on volume. So if it's not strictly imaging, for example, imaging repositories definitely can handle the load, but other repositories may not. So you may have a consideration to think about with how much data to share. But I will also say, in my past life as a researcher, if I were to have shared all the raw data, that would just make my signal to noise ratio horrible. So this is why we rely on you all as the subject matter experts to really think about what is valuable and what, definitely share whatever was behind publications, but you all are ultimately going to be the experts on what is the most useful data to share for others in your field.
Excellent. Thanks both. Next question here. For studies that fall under Empower, will the HEAL CDE portion of data be collected? Or sorry, try to read that again. For studies that fall under Empower, will the HEAL CDE portion of data collected be transferred from Empower? Or is it the PI's responsibility to create and upload separate data sets? And who wants to take that one?
I think that's a question for your coordinating center. I think that different groups seem to be handling that slightly differently. Same with platform registration. Data coordinating centers or coordinating centers can certainly reach out to the platform team, and I just dropped their email in the Q&A response, and work with the platform team to tell them how you want your study represented on your set of studies represented on the platform. There's a lot of flexibility there, and we're kind of going off the way that awards are made and structured, and so that's not necessarily the best for everyone. I know I'm being a little tangential here, but I'll come back to the question, which is that DCCs might be doing it differently. So I think you need to talk to the coordinating center and hear what the specific process for your coordinating center will be on the data sharing, the data sets, the CDEs, and on the platform registration piece. And just know that on the platform registration piece, we have a lot of flexibility with the platform of how to arrange those studies and make them look in the platform.
Excellent. All right. This next one actually has a couple questions within it. So I'll probably let it, and anyone kind of jump in on it. For data reanalysis, do we need to share the original data obtained from some existing database, or could we just share the output of the data analysis? And then the next kind of question within that, do we need to share the data with the code at the same time? We often share code through GitHub.
Yeah, there's a lot of components. So I'm just going to take the easiest question, which is, guess what? You can totally share code through GitHub. That is great. And I highly recommend you continue that best practice. Anthony, do you want to jump in about
This speaks directly to my heart surrounding, research reproducibility, transparency, et cetera. So this is very much in line with the mission, vision, and how we thought through both study level metadata and sort of the granularity of digital assets that we want to ensure we can link in to the platform. We certainly encourage you to share your code and that raw data just for the full reproducibility of that research data lifecycle and all the analysis therein, so that you have as much transparency and reproducibility as possible. And we can link in and index both the actual data files, the code, and et cetera. So thank you, and highly encourage you to do so. And we look forward and hope that that level of reproducibility, we greatly appreciate it.
Awesome. Thanks both. Next question here. Is there a template of the data management plan we should be using?
I can take that one. So yes, there's a really great resource called DMP Tool, and it's a free open source online resource that essentially breaks the data management and sharing plan out into sections with help text. There's also links and resources to your funders page so that you can fully understand the requirements and what sort of responses that you need to type out. And there are even sample plans. You can make your plans public or private. And they also have institutional affiliations. And so some of you who are working at institutions might also even get some free additional resources. And so we highly recommend the DMP tool. It's really great and easy to use. And so that would be a great resource for this.
Excellent. Next question here. Can you provide some examples of the 26 repositories? I'm curious to know how each repository differs. And then as an example, is it by data types or broader research areas?
Great question. So there's a reason why there's over 20 repositories. So if you were ever to take a gander at the healdatafair.org website, that's the website that the HEAL Stewards run. There's a repository resource that lists all the repositories that are currently HEAL compliant and have been officially vetted by the HEAL program staff on this call. And so some examples include IC specific ones. So there are some HEAL awards that it's stipulated in their award that they must store their data into this IC specific repository. So those are listed at the top because those take precedence over any other repository that we may recommend. But there are also data type specific repositories such as imaging, such as genomics, that we have a metabolomics workbench. I really just recommend you taking a look at the repository, but it is generally by data type, not by broad research area. And then additionally, there is a further component while you're considering where to put your data. So for some folks who are generating information on study subjects or patient level information, yes, there's level D identification, that would be nice. But if you prefer to have a repository that is controlled access, we do also have recommendations of controlled access repositories that makes it so that in order for an external investigator to get access to those data, they must apply for the access and sign a data user agreement or whatever is needed before they can access it.
All right. Let's see. Next question. And I think actually this question may have already been answered. But do you recommend a budget cost tool other than NDA? I think that may have already been asked. So it might be a similar question. Okay. All right. Again, I think this question might be similar in the chat. We just dropped the link to the repository guidance, but do you have a repository on your list that allows storage of PHI and will take legal responsibility for controlled access adhering to a DUA process?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can take that. So yes, we do have multiple repositories that provide controlled access and, you know, require a DUA before someone accesses your data. And so if that is something that you're having trouble finding, obviously feel free to reach out to us and we can talk through your needs and your requirements. But we do have repos on the list that fit those needs.
Excellent. A couple more questions still here. Between, and I always say this word wrong, I apologize, between informaticists and statisticians, who are you finding is more often responsible for the data preparation and submissions? How are institutions/teams allocating these responsibilities?
Well, there's a couple of ways. It's interesting because I'm interpreting this question in a number of different ways. So who is often most responsible for the data preparation and submission? So depending on the lab, it could be anyone from there's a designated data manager that does that, or some kind of project manager, or depending on the size of the lab, it could be postdocs. So the way that the submission for and the registration for your study on the platform and filling out the metadata on the CEDAR form is that anyone in your lab is able to do it on behalf of the PI. So we're trying to spread the load, so it's not necessarily one person has to do it all. And then how are institutions and teams allocating these responsibilities? So if you have a data coordinating center, obviously speak with them about if there are any specific points of contact for you to be aware of. But otherwise, it really just depends on what your individual labs look like.
Excellent. And then how does one handle virtual screening and molecular modeling? Not sure if I understand the full context of the question.
Yeah, I want that person to, so at the end of this webinar, if you are the person who asked the question and you're still on, please send a connect with us form because we want to hear a little bit more about the types of data that you're generating. Because Worst case scenario, you can choose a generalist repository because it'll accept all types of data, but we want to make sure that we recommend a repository that best fits your study.
Right, and then this might be the last question here. So Spark is the designated repository for rejoin. Is there a way to get them on the list of approved repositories? Maybe Kira, Ali, I can hand that to one of y'all.
I mean, I can just jump in and say that the stewards do a careful evaluation of the repositories before they're on the list, and their principles are published, and NIH, we review that list with them, and we review the principles with them, and the principles are based off of the BMIC principles that are the published NIH principles, and there's a guide notice too. So if you're interested in understanding sort of the parameters that we thought about in selecting repositories, and I mean, of course, we also consider HEAL data and the needs of HEAL as part of that. So.
Okay. I think that looks like all of the questions here. I just want to say thank you to our presenters, Kira Bradford, Ali Gartland-Gray, as well as our Q&A guests, Jess Mazarek, Anthony Juni. We are very grateful for your insights. In addition to our presenters and our panelists, we would also like to acknowledge some of the behind-the-scenes team listed here who worked diligently to bring this webinar and the series to production. Also, just want to say a big thank you to the audience for your participation, the great questions asked in today's webinar. We hope that you're leaving with a better understanding of how to make your data HEAL compliant. In addition to a recording of this webinar, we will also email everyone who has registered for this event a list of resources that will assist you as you participate more deeply in the HEAL ecosystem. This slide deck will be shared, and a link to our Slack channel and Connect with Us forum are located in that chat. We hope that you will reach out to us, the HEAL Stewards, for questions or support as you embark on your fair journey to maximize the value of HEAL data. Finally, we look forward to seeing you either in person or virtually at the 4th annual HEAL PI meeting, and that's going to be on February 20th and 21st. We will have a booth set up for HEAL investigators to get assistance with their data management questions. Also, please keep an eye out for details on our next webinar, which is going to be in March. And with that, thanks again, everyone, and have a wonderful afternoon.